So I'm often asked what we might refer to as burning questions. And because I do so much couples counseling, and obviously there can be significant issues within those marriages between the husband and the wife. And there are times where there is some type of abuse. So today we want to talk a little bit about marital abuse, and the question that often arises, and so often couples are caught, they're trapped in kind of a codependent, abusive situation, and they don't know what to do. Particularly Christian couples. But it's not exclusive to Christians. It's just, we know that God hates divorce, and He's not for divorce, and so oftentimes when there's abuse, the abuse is tolerated, and that should never be tolerated. What does the Bible say about the abuse? Well, when it comes to marital abuse, unfortunately, it's kind of silent. The Bible doesn't specifically say anything about spousal abuse. It certainly doesn't give us a reason to divorce for spousal abuse, although it's obvious that God expects a marriage to look like what He intended to be. And that is a supportive, loving, mutually submitting being for each other. And so there's really no room for abuse, and abuse is contrary to everything that's godly. And so in no way should you tolerate an abusive situation. Whether that's physical abuse, whether that's, even a severe verbal mental abuse should not be tolerated. There needs to be, help needs to be gotten. And so when it comes to physical abuse against the spouse, it's immoral, and it should not be tolerated by either the husband or the wife. And frankly, there can be abuse either way. Oftentimes we think of abuse in a marriage as, being the husband being the abuser, and he certainly can be, and that may be a higher percentage. But no one should remain in an unsafe environment. I want to make that perfectly clear. Whether it involves a family member, a friend, an employer, a caregiver, or a stranger. If you are in an unsafe environment, you need to get out of that environment. You separate yourself from that environment. And so physical abuse, do I need to remind us in a marriage? Physical abuse is against the law. It's illegal. Civil authorities should be the first ones contacted if an abuse occurs. And often, they're the last ones. I mean, I can't tell you the case studies that I've dealt with in counseling over the years where, I don't find out to the third or the fourth session from, in this particular illustration, the wife says, oh yeah, my husband didn't come today because last night was an abusive, drunken brawl, and I finally called the police, but it's been going on for 8 months. I'm like, what? None of that was brought up prior to that. So, no, you should not tolerate physical abuse, and if there is physical abuse, you definitely call 911. You get the authorities, you file a complaint, and you separate yourself, and the first priority is safety. Separation needs to happen for one's safety and for proper boundaries. Yes, boundaries must be in place because somebody's character is out of balance. That character is not Christian. It's not moral, and somebody's life is at stake here. And so boundaries need to be put into place. And so a spouse who is being abused should immediately seek a safe place. And if there are children involved in this situation, they should be protected and removed from the situation as well. And I can't tell you over the years how many situations where I had to advise the wife and the children to go to a safe house. And there are some good safe houses, not every community has them, where the spouse sometimes is very dangerous, and so they don't know where to find the spouse and the children for any kind of retaliation. That's vitally important. So I want to emphasize here, there is nothing unbiblical about separating from an abuser. By the way, separation and a divorce are two different things. We'll get into when divorce might be a necessary alternative because over time the abuser just refuses to change and continues to get worse. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So there's nothing unbiblical about separating from an abusive spouse. And in fact, I'm encouraging you to separate. Seek, if it's physical abuse, seek law enforcement, seek church, family, seek a support group, and don't put yourself in that kind of an abusive situation. In fact, it is morally right to protect oneself and one's children. The Bible talks about husbands not providing for their families, which is kind of an abuse, being equated with an infidel. So of course you separate yourself and your children from an abusive situation. Now, let's talk about what happens next. Let's talk about reconciling. Let's talk about working through these dynamics. Because because there is an abusive situation doesn't necessarily mean you leave for good. Okay? Separation should be for a period of time. So reconciling with an abusive partner depends completely on the abuser providing his or her reliability. Now, so often, a couple days go by, okay, I'm ready to move back in. Whoa. What's changed? Nothing. So there has to be some verifiable reliability that something has changed. And so that can take time. And that's not going to take time just between the husband and the wife. Don't try to work this out yourselves. And so often that's what happens. No, a third party, a trusted pastor, a counselor. Like I said, if there's been physical abuse, law enforcement. There's a small nucleus of people that are working with you and aware of it, so that there's some accountability, there are some boundaries that are put into place. So separation from an abusive spouse is likely to be a little longer than some of us would think. Particularly, in most cases, this is not a one-time event, unfortunately. Most couples that I've worked with, this abuse has been going on, and they'll say, oh, it hasn't happened for 6 months. Well, maybe the last time was only 4 months, or maybe the last time was only 3 months. But it's on and off for several years before they finally seek counsel. So the core issues have never been addressed. And so this separation could take much longer than one realizes. Don't put a time limit on this. The only time limit on is there been verifiable, reliable change. Is the individual now trustworthy? And trust it takes time and it has to be verified. And trust is based on track record. So as they say, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. Where's the evidence that there's been a change? And so once separation has been established, the abuser has the responsibility to get the help. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that in a marriage conflict, both the husband and the wife have contributed to that dysfunction. Of course they have. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. The marriage has been dysfunctional on other levels, and sometimes the husband or the wife could be provoking some of this. I understand that. But there is no excuse whatsoever for physical abuse. Zero. None. And so the abuser now, they have the responsibility. The burden's on them to get the help that they need. The first thing that needs to be addressed, and I would say first and foremost, that individual should truly seek God. I do Christian counseling. If that person doesn't have a personal relationship, an intimate relationship with God, obviously they don't have an intimate one, but if they don't have a relationship with God, they need to seek God. The scripture says, in fact, Matthew 7:8, for everyone, these are Jesus' words, for everyone who asks, receives. Everyone who seeks, finds. And the door is opened to everyone who knocks. Now, I get that Jesus is talking to Old Covenant believers and the cross hadn't occurred. And now we have the indwelling presence of Jesus who enables all that to occur. So you don't have to go outside of yourself to seek that kind of help with the Lord. That's an inner spiritual recollection to where you begin to recognize, okay, God, obviously I've got some significant heavy-duty flesh patterns of sin, and I'm acting them out. And this is unacceptable. So you begin to let the Lord, you begin to seek the Lord, allowing Him to reveal the things that need to be addressed in your life. Psychological aid and legal limitations, yes, when I talk about legal limitations, I'm talking about restraining orders, on an abuser are an appropriate tool and are vitally important to that individual, either whether it's his or her progress to, again, prove that change has occurred. So when there's been physical abuse, it is appropriate to get a restraining order to make sure of the safety of that spouse and the children who are still living in the home where the abuser knows where they're at. And so they've done this repeatedly. A restraining order is in place. So if they come anywhere near the residence, the police should be called and they should be arrested. So if the abuser demonstrates over time with counseling and boundaries verifiable change, independently confirmed, then the relationship may be resumed, but I would add, with caution. In other words, once you get back together, some of those same flesh patterns, some of those same idiosyncrasies, we know how to push each other's buttons, doesn't mean everything's going to have been resolved. And so, yes, hopefully the abuser's gotten to a place where he's trustworthy or she's trustworthy, and now we can reunite and there can be a reconciliation between the relationship. But again, now it's not like we're putting each other under a microscope, but it's just trust and verify. It's just trust and verify. And so both the husband and the wife must commit themselves and submit themselves to God and develop their relationship with God through Christ. Again, this probably has more to do with a spiritual dysfunction than it does a marital dysfunction. The reason we don't know how to maritally cohabitate and relationally love one another is because we probably have our own spiritual issues, and we need to allow God to help us to flush out the reasons behind why we're not participating with Him and then offering that to our spouse. And so the spiritual realities are always at the core of these disputes. Here's what the psalmist said in Psalm 119. He says, "Keep me from deceptive ways. Be gracious to me and teach me your law. I have chosen the way of faithfulness. I have set my heart on your laws." Now, that's Old Covenant. The good news is that Jesus Christ fulfilled the law. If you're a Christian, Jesus Christ indwells within you. He's kept the law and He's removed the law. And so now all you need to be concerned about is participating with Him, allowing His righteous character to be manifest towards your spouse. And so this commitment to God isn't so much your commitment to Him as much as it's His commitment to you. Did you hear that?
We hope you enjoyed today's video on Life as God Intended. If you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit that button below so you get a notification every time we upload one of our weekly videos. Be sure to hop over to our blog where you can read articles and notes on today's message and sign up for our emails there. We'll see you back here in a few days, and until then, enjoy life as God intended.